Hello folks, we are going to talk about reserved IP addresses. Certain addresses are reserved and cannot be assigned to individual devices on the network. These include the network address, the directed broadcast address, the local broadcast address, the local loopback address, and the auto configuration IP address. Let's start with the network address. The network address or an address where the value of 0 is set for all bits that are in the host position. Recall that we have a default mask for each class of IP address. In the class A address space, the default mask would be a A/8, which indicates that the very first 8-bit would have the value set to 1, identifying the network. So let's say we had an address of 10.0.0.0. The very first bit, the first 8 bits would indicate the network portion. So that would be 255.0.0.0 in the mask. And then the last 3 octet, the mask would read 0.0.0. If those last 3 octet in the IP address are all set to value of 0, this would indicate the network address. If the value were 10.0.0.1, since that fourth octet has a bit value set to something other than 0, this would no longer indicate the network address. This would actually be the first usable host address on this network address space. Now let's talk about the directed broadcast address. If you are going to send traffic to every single device on the network, you need to either know each individual address or you need to use the broadcast address. Broadcast address is a single value where binary ones are set in entire host portion of the address, in which case all host devices connected to the network will respond. If we had an address of 10.255.255.255, this would indicate the directed broadcast address for the 10 network, and you could send to that address so that all host devices on the network would read it here and be able to respond. Next, we have a local broadcast address. Local broadcast address is used if single device wants to communicate with all devices on its local network, but it doesn't want to be routed to the directed broadcast address. In this case, we send it to address of all ones. The address would be 255.255.255.255. I think in the last slide I repeated this slide, so there is a mistake. In last slide you can just put 10 instead of 255, the first 3 digit. So okay, we would transmit the packet to the destination, and any of the hosts that are on that network would be able to reply. This is an address that is never routed outside of local segment. Next address we want to talk about is local loopback address. Local loopback address is used so that the system can send a message to itself, or oftentimes we use this for testing. If we want to see if our IP stack is reachable, we ping the local loopback address. A typical local loopback address is 127.0.0.1. Although it doesn't have to be, it could be 127 dot anything, so as long as it is within the 32-bit IP address space. Finally, we have the auto configuration IP address. When we put address on our host, we either do it dynamically through a protocol known as DHCP, or we statically or manually assign IP addresses. Although this doesn't scale very well, in some cases host devices are not going to be configured manually, and we don't have DHCP in place. If the host support RFC 3927, they can generate an address in the address space of 169.254 with the 16 /16 prefix. That address can then be used to communicate locally on the network. This address space is also not routed. Most of the time you are going to see this when a computer boots up on a network. Doesn't get an address via DHCP, and so it automatically assigns one of these 169 address to itself. These are private addresses. So in next lecture we are going to talk about public and private IP addresses. So see you on next lecture.